The walls inside Buckingham Palace are cracking, and what is spilling out is ugly. Royal watchers say the family is in serious crisis, and sitting at the very heart of it is Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, who has just been violently pushed out of the royal circle after Princess Anne made a disturbing discovery about him that shook the palace to its core.
And I don't think either of those two could have been able to cope. They'd been anywhere else. And that was the only good thing that happened, was that they were there.
Camilla is scrambling to contain the damage, but she's far too late because what's coming for her is darker and more devastating. And it's more final than anything she has ever faced. It's the son she was forced to leave behind. Tom Parker Bowles watched his mother become Queen of England, knowing in that exact moment her crown would never be enough to protect him. While the world watched Camilla's coronation with celebration, something very different was happening quietly behind palace walls. A door was being slammed shut for good, and the person helping to close it was none other than Princess Anne, who had been collecting every horrible thing he had ever done, and was carefully filing it all away. That secret file began in the most painful place you could possibly imagine. It began with Tom, just a teenager forced to watch his family get ripped apart in front of the entire world. Tom Parker Bowles was barely an adult when his parents' marriage imploded for everyone to see on the global stage. His father, Andrew Parker Bowles, was a highly decorated military man, a figure of respect and dignity. And yet he was publicly shamed in the cruelest way possible, confirmed for hundreds of millions of people to see. He was the man the future King of England had so famously betrayed. Tom had no choice but to watch. He couldn't run from it, and he couldn't escape the label that was burned onto him forever. He was simply Camilla's son. That became his entire identity. It came before anything else he could ever do or be. And the woman he was attached to was, for many, many years, one of the most hated and despised human beings in all of Britain. But that wound was just the beginning, because in 1999, Tom Parker Bowles created a crisis so huge it nearly destroyed everything his mother had been painfully and carefully building. And he managed to do it in the most reckless way imaginable. A reporter for the News of the World posed as a wealthy Arab sheikh and made contact with Tom. What they talked about was secretly recorded. On that tape, Tom Parker Bowles offered to supply both cocaine and cannabis. The police formally cautioned him, and the story exploded across the British media, with the sort of shocking force that permanently scars everyone it touches. But the drugs were not the only scandal. They were just the only thing that got out. There was also a married woman. Her husband was a recognizable celebrity, the kind of famous name that sells newspapers all by itself. The two of them were seeing each other for months before. Somebody close to the scandal got nervous enough to pick up the phone, but not to the press, to the people who exist. To make sure stories like this never reach the press, it was handled. The husband never said a word, and the woman stayed quiet. And the story died in a desk drawer before the public ever heard of it. Then you had the gambling. People close to Tom during that time said the debts got so serious that his friends were genuinely afraid for him. They were terrified of who might come to collect and what that awful conversation might look like if it happened in public. And then on top of that there were the antiques. Quiet rumours circulated among people in the media and art worlds that some pieces moving through Tom's network back then didn't exactly have clean histories. But nothing was ever proven. No charges were ever filed. Still, the rumours never really went away. They just got buried under everything else. The timing of all this wasn't just bad. It was absolutely catastrophic. Camilla was still fighting every single day to make herself accepted by an institution and a public that basically hated her. And now her son had just been caught on tape offering to sell illegal drugs to a total stranger. The palace was absolutely furious. Prince Charles reportedly had to step in himself to begin managing the crisis. Tom hadn't just humiliated himself. He had taken a lit match and held it right under his mother's entire future. The palace spent incredible energy putting that fire out without anyone noticing. The story faded, but the palace didn't forget. That drug scandal went into his permanent record, and it stayed there. Every single decision made about Tom Parker Bowles from then on was made with that embarrassing record sitting right there in the background. Now here is the one detail that makes this whole story land with its full devastating weight. After all that Camilla became queen, her portrait now hangs in official government spaces. Her name appears on state papers. She sits right beside the King of England at the most formal and powerful events this country ever produces. The crown is on her head. She is on the throne. She made it, and Tom Parker Bowles got nothing from it. Not one single penny of public money, no sovereign grant, no official royal residence, no royal title, and no formal role of any kind inside the institution his mother now helps to lead. While his mother Camilla was being crowned, Tom was a simple food critic. He built his career with his own 2 hands, with no help from the family his mother had paid such a high price to join. And that gap between what Camilla became and what Tom was left with, permitted to become, is one of the most quietly devastating parts of this whole story, and it wasn't an accident. It's the product of decisions made on purpose and enforced for many years by people who had decided, without a doubt, that Camilla's new status would not be extended to her son. The question that burns through everything now is who exactly was drawing that line from the very start and ensuring it never ever moved in Tom's favour. The answer to that question really begins with Princess Anne, a woman who had been watching Tom Parker Bowles for a long time, a woman who was building something quietly, patiently and methodically, and she was nearly ready to use it. This woman had been watching him for years, to truly understand why Anne was watching. Tom, the way she was, you have to first understand Anne's opinion of his mother, because the chill started with Camilla, and it never ever warmed up. Royal experts like Penny Junor and Robert Lacey have all noted that. Princess Anne was among the very last of the senior royals to ever accept Camilla's presence in the family, and even after she did that, acceptance came without any real warmth or generosity. When Camilla first started trying to build some bridges, she did what anyone in her position does. She sent flowers. She sent presents. She tried. A delivery showed up at Anne's home with a handwritten note attached to it. Anne just looked at it. She refused to open it. She turned to her staff and said flatly, "Take that to the rubbish where it belongs. Nothing good can come from a person who destroys homes." The flowers went straight into the bin. The gesture was dead on arrival. Anne didn't hate Camilla in a loud or showy way. No, it was much quieter and much more dangerous. It was the controlled anger of a woman who truly believed that what Camilla had done to the monarchy was a deep wound that would take generations to properly heal. Anne's whole identity is built on a single core principle that she has never once backed away from for a single moment of her. Public life. Your place inside the royal family is earned through constant service, personal sacrifice, and relentless duty. You don't just get to walk in a side door because a king happens to be in love with you. You earn your place with years of thankless, exhausting public engagements that nobody ever praises you for. That is the standard Anne holds herself. To every last day of her life, no exceptions. And by that exact standard, Camilla hadn't earned a thing. She had simply just refused to go away for long enough that the institution finally ran out of ways to keep her out. Anne accepted Camilla, because that decision was made above her pay grade, and fighting it was no longer an option. But she never for a second lowered her guard, and she absolutely did not extend that reluctant acceptance to Tom. What Anne saw Tom building over the years truly enraged her. Tom had built a very successful public profile as a well-known food critic, an author, and a television personality. He had major newspaper columns, book deals, primetime shows, and all of it looked legitimate from the outside. But all of it was built, at least in Anne's view, on just one thing. The reality that his mother was queen and that royal connection did all the hard work for him everywhere he went. It opened doors for him. It put him in rooms that any other food writer, without those royal connections, would have never been allowed anywhere near. Anne saw that perfectly. She had always seen it, because here is the one thing that angered her the most. The royal family name has power because the people who have it give their entire lives to earning that power. They serve, they sacrifice, and they show up for decades on end without a single complaint. Tom had done none of that. He was simply born to the right mother at exactly the right time and let that royal association do its work quietly in the background while he built up his whole career on top of it. Anne had spent 50 years earning every single inch of her reputation. Tom had just inherited his by being close to power, and he had never once, at least as far as Anne was concerned, even acknowledged that huge difference. And then Tom started doing something that truly set off alarm bells for Anne. He began making public statements about the royal family. In his interviews and his media spots, he would give his opinions on the institution like he actually had some real authority to do so. He spoke as if his mother's role as queen made his own views on royal issues worth hearing. No one inside the palace ever told him that. No one ever would. He also got quite judgmental. Whenever the mood struck him, he would criticize people in power. And then there is the story that was passed around quietly in some circles that Tom once told a close friend, that one specific senior royal was just dumb and not fit to be in their position at all. The name that was attached to that comment, if it were to ever fully come out, would cause serious damage. For Princess Anne, this wasn't just some embarrassing moment. It was a direct assault on everything she stood for. The question she started asking behind the palace doors was completely impossible to answer in any comfortable way. What if Tom said something publicly that blew up into a massive crisis? If he made a huge statement that forced the monarchy into a defensive crouch it had, unprepared for what if his business dealings crossed a line, dragging a damaging media storm? Right back to the institution, could they contain it? Everyone in that room already knew the answer because they had lived through this exact thing before. The 1999 drug scandal showed with brutal clarity that Tom Parker Bowles could spark a full-blown institutional crisis. The palace had contained that disaster with quiet intervention and a huge behind-the-scenes effort. But Anne's point was cold. Managing a crisis once didn't mean the actual risk was gone. It simply meant the institution got lucky, and luck was never a strategy for protecting the British monarchy. Anne had been building this case for years. She had all she needed, and she was ready to walk into that room and lay it all on the table for the people who had the power to act. What she did next sent shockwaves through the palace, and it would put Camilla in the most impossible and heartbreaking position of her life. This was the revelation that changed it all. Anne requested a private meeting with senior royals in the household. She sat down, and then she went. Right for the jugular. He has no title, he has no role, he has no business speaking for this family in public, as if any of us approve of what he says, and yet, here we are. Every single word landed like a heavy weight dropped from a height. She made it clear this wasn't personal, and that was the most lethal part. She wasn't there as an angry stepsister. She was there as a senior working royal with 40 years of service, and she was telling the room that the firm had a problem it was far too comfortable ignoring. Then she brought up the 1999 drug case and slammed it on the table. This was buried. I am unburying it, because if we sit here and do nothing again then, that choice belongs to all of us. The room had no response to that. She had framed every piece of it as duty, so pushing back meant you were arguing against the monarchy itself. Anne had not come to that meeting to complain. She came to make doing nothing impossible, and she did precisely that. But this is where the story gets darker than anything Anne even said in that room. The most devastating reply to Anne's bombshell didn't come from Charles. It didn't come from William. It came in the most painful and crushing way imaginable from Camilla herself. Or to be exact, it came from her complete inability to respond whatsoever. Camilla had no move she could make that didn't cost her dearly. She could not step forward in public to defend Tom without seeming to put her son's personal agenda above her duty to the Crown. That duty was the only reason she had ever successfully argued for her own acceptance by the institution. Sacrificing it now for Tom wouldn't just hurt her standing, it would destroy the only justification she had ever given for being there at all. She couldn't challenge Anne openly without starting a visible internal war. That would shatter the carefully built image of royal stability she had spent her whole public life creating. Every headline would scream about chaos inside the palace. Every story would pull the conversation right back to the affair, the scandal, and the years of damage that Camilla was supposed to have put behind her for good. She would hand her enemies the very weapon they had always wanted, and she'd do it with her own hands. Camilla was trapped. Her fingers just tapped the table. Slow, steady. It was the only thing she could control in that room. The fury was there, anyone could see it, but that anger had nowhere safe to go, and she knew it. That was what hurt the most. For years before Anne ever forced this moment, Camilla had already been pulling Tom back from the spotlight. Quietly, deliberately. She knew who he was. She knew his cost, and she had decided on her own in private that the crown was worth far more than their closeness. She chose her position over her son, and she buried that choice deep where no one could ever see it. The institution had heard everything it needed to. Now it needed someone with the authority and the absolute will to make a final decision. And there was only one person left who truly fit that description. The door that was never supposed to open. When Charles got his cancer diagnosis and the slow handover of his operational duties too, William became impossible to deny. Something shifted deep inside the palace that went beyond medical plans and simple scheduling. Decisions about who was really in the inner circle, who had true access to the crown, and whose closeness was acceptable now flowed through Prince William's judgment. And William's judgment on this issue is not complicated, it's not up for debate, and it has never ever been ambiguous. William has been on record, consistently by royal sources and commentators, as someone who sees the monarchy through an incredibly narrow framework. A framework so fiercely defended it practically functions like a fortress. Inside are working royals, blood royals, and people who have truly earned their place through official service and public duty. Everything else remains outside those walls, and it is meant to stay outside. He pushed back with ferocity against Harry and Meghan when they tried to create a new platform that blurred the line between royal and non-royal life. He has been described by sources close to the palace as a man who views non-royals gaining influence by association with a deep, genuine and unshakable suspicion. For him, the monarchy has to be a clean, tight and fiercely defended institution with clear boundaries. A structure with zero ambiguity tolerated, and Tom Parker Bowles, when measured against every one of those standards that William holds so dear, simply does not belong inside those walls. Anne's revelation handed William the perfect formal excuse to enforce a judgment he had already made long before that meeting even happened. And now the time had come. It was finally time to handle Camilla's son. William wasted no time at all. He made the calls, signed the documents, and just like that, Tom's world began to completely fall apart. And this is where the story gets truly brutal. You see, the palace never told him. No formal decision was ever presented to him, and that was the entire point. Because if nothing was ever officially said, then nothing could ever be proven. Tom has no single moment to point to nothing he can challenge. There was nothing to appeal. The door was slammed shut on him, and nobody ever admitted they were the one who closed it. What they did instead was brutally simple. They just stopped letting him in. Invitations quietly stopped showing up. His name was simply erased from guest lists without a single word of explanation. Events he used to attend just went on without him, and nobody ever offered him a reason, an apology, or even acknowledged that anything at all had changed. People who had once been warm to him became just formally polite, and that politeness soon curdled into cold distance. Doors that once required no effort to open for him were now staying firmly shut, no matter how hard he pushed. But Tom Parker Bowles is not a naive man, and he is definitely not a stupid one. He understood precisely what was happening to him. He could trace the clear outline of the decision that was made against him, even though no one would ever confirm it. And he knew he couldn't say a single word about any of it publicly, because the moment Tom speaks, the entire thing collapses. The second he sits down for an interview and describes what was done to him, he instantly becomes the crisis. Every headline then becomes about the Queen's son, causing major problems for the monarchy. Every conversation gets dragged back to 1999, back to the drug caution, back to every single piece of damaging history the institution and its allies would immediately use against him. It would be a fight he could not win. He would be destroyed in it quickly, publicly, and without mercy. And the one person who would pay the ultimate price for his destruction would not be Tom. It would be his mother, Camilla. Every story about his bitterness becomes a story about instability surrounding the Queen. Every headline about his treatment becomes a question of her own judgment and loyalties. All of that damage crashes directly onto the woman he loves. So Tom just does what he has always done. He keeps writing his food columns. He films his television shows. He shows up to the events he's still permitted to attend, and he leaves exactly when he is supposed to. He stands by his mother when the situation allows, and he steps back the moment it doesn't. From the outside, it all looks calm, controlled, almost easy. It is none of those things, because Tom knows he is being watched. There are reports that William made this crystal clear in person, that at one particular event where they crossed paths, William looked right at him and said very quietly, with no possible room for misunderstanding, "Don't you cross me." Tom has not crossed him. He stays in his lane, not because he has accepted any of this, but because the alternative means dragging his mother into a war that she could never afford to fight. Tom knows exactly what William is capable of. He's watched what this family does to people who become inconvenient. He has seen just how quietly and how completely a person can be erased. And he knows William now has the power to finish what Anne started. One wrong move and William doesn't just come for him. He comes for everything that his mother has spent her entire life building. Tom lives with that heavy knowledge every single day, and it is what keeps him very, very still.